Welcome to the Achieve Workplace Culture podcast, where Wendy, Chris, and Eric explore the latest news stories, their work, and trends for creating and maintaining a healthy workplace culture.
There was a commercial growing up in Oregon that played all the time on one of the channels that we had on our, was it UHF? Like channel 22, channel 49. Yeah. Wash your hands after going to the bathroom. Wash your hands after changing baby too. Because we don't want you to catch hepatitis.
Wow.
And we don't want hepatitis to catch you.
Were you recording? Perfect. Just making sure. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a new opening jingle for the podcast.
Do you find yourself singing that sometimes when you're washing your hands?
No, I do not. But that thing comes into my head. It's like, when people say they want to wash their hands, or we should wash your hands, I heard that jingle so many times as a kid. We need a jingle for our show, I think.
Absolutely.
A little jingle.
Maybe not about hepatitis.
No, maybe
we'll figure,
not.
Yeah.
No,
but we don't want people to get it.
No, we
absolutely.
don't want people to catch hepatitis.
Achieve cleanliness.
Okay, achieve cleanliness. Okay.
Achieve cleanliness. The new show. That's a spin-off show.
Exactly.
All right. Well, welcome to episode 42 of the Achieve Workplace Culture podcast, where we help you, our listener, and sometimes us, find strategies and actionable items to strengthen your workplace culture. And as always, we make the case that if you're not paying attention to workplace culture, you're also probably missing things in terms of implementing your strategy and achieving the most effective workplace that you can have. So I'm Eric Stutzman, and I'm here today with my co-host, my regular co-host, Chris Downey, over there in that chair, and our guest co-host, Scott McKay, who I will introduce a bit more in a moment. Our regular co-host, Wendy Lowen, is teaching our leadership certificate program today, which Chris is also teaching, but not today. They're sort of taking turns all week long on this.
Yeah, it's a 5-day program, and we're at day 4.
Day 4.
It's a very engaged group. So, yeah, I'm sure she's having a great time.
And you were just making the point this morning that there's been all kinds of fabulous questions coming up in that course that's got your brain firing.
Without question, a really engaged group of participants and covering, we're covered coast to coast all the way down to San Diego.
Oh, nice.
In this cohort. So this is some really great questions. So
awesome. Well, if you think of one of those you want to throw in today, go ahead and do so. So as I said a moment ago, we're welcoming Scott McKay, who is our producer on the show, and who we have, Chris and I and Wendy have heard lots of feedback from Scott over the last couple of years. Scott's been producing the show, and we have sometimes taken a question from Scott in the middle of the show, or he's flashed up a little note with maybe you should answer this question, or after the show he said, but how do you do that? From a middle management perspective. And so we wanted to do a show that's really dedicated to workplace culture and the role of the not senior leader, but the more middle leader, the person who might be managing a small team, or maybe a director in an organization who's got a couple of levels above them, or somebody who really cares about workplace culture, has a team of people they're responsible for, but doesn't necessarily hold the purse strings or sit on the executive committee. And so that's what we're going to do today, is we're going to take some time to go, okay, Scott, you've been listening in for, I guess, more than 3 years now. You've had some ideas and some thoughts that you're going to bring to the show. And in fact, this is not just a show where we answer Scott's questions, but Scott has gone around and collected questions from a variety of other folks. You want to, who did you collect questions from?
So
I'm
happy.
Scott.
Yeah, and welcome here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm the oldest and longest fan. Been listening since episode 1. So this is very exciting. So who did I ask these questions of? I went around our entire organization, and anyone who was a people leader, manager, or just someone who has a background in maybe management from previous roles. And I wanted to just throw questions out to you all.
Right.
And I wanted to make sure I got some curveballs.
Okay.
So that was my success criteria. So that was my criteria when I went to these folks and I said, hey, I need to try and stump Eric and Chris. Please give me something. Give me ammo. And so those are the folks I asked. Everyone that you have lunch with every single day.
Awesome. You know what my strategy is when I get a curveball, Scott?
You just pass it back to
me. I just pass it back. I'm good at
Believe me,
passing
I
it back.
question.
What do you think about that,
thoughts?
Scott? So you better be prepared, right?
But I'm really curious as what actually you think, Eric. And then after 45 minutes, the meeting ends and we've gotten nowhere. So this is great.
Fantastic. Well, we'll do what we can there. So for our regular listeners, this show, while we're going to take questions and discuss workplace culture based on the questions that Scott's brought to us, and Chris and I don't know what the questions are,
Right.
so we're going to just take them as they come. It's going to be fun. But we will end the show as we normally do with a rant and a rave. Scott's got a rant prepared for today, and I've got sort of a rant rave to end the show with at the end of the day today, so you can stay tuned for that. And then, as always, at the end of the show, Chris will take us out with some actionable ideas, strategies that you can implement in your workplace. So, hey, why don't we just dive right in, Scott? Maybe, don't start too hard, get us warmed up or something, right?
Soft one. Because on that note, it's one of the things to highlight, as you were saying, Eric, we haven't seen these questions, and that's by design.
Yes.
Because the reality is when leaders are faced with situations, you don't really have a lot of lead up
know.
oftentimes. So that was kind of the idea, to be on our toes here, because that's a little bit more representative of what's really going on day to day for people when they're out there. If you could predict what's going to happen, that would make life a lot easier, but you can't always. So
That's a very good point. Yeah. If I could have a few minutes of prep before I have to answer a question, maybe I send my direct report out of my office for a while, get ChatGPT to respond.
Sure.
That would be great, but that's not real life,
That's not the
right?
way it
So
happens. Sure.
that was my thought when putting these together. Okay, so you want an easy one, and I'm
whatever.
looking at my list, and I came out of the gates.
Okay, go
for
out.
it.
Let's go out fast.
okay.
Okay, let's do it.
How can middle managers communicate decisions they don't agree with to their team while also maintaining trust with their team? Hard, right?
It is a hard one. I've got some thoughts. How about you, Chris?
I have thoughts as well.
Why don't you start?
Sure. Well, so that is a challenge I think most individuals in leadership roles have faced. And it's a difficult spot to be in. I certainly have been there myself. So if I understand the question, how can middle managers communicate a change or communicate a decision or a change that they might not themselves agree with,
Absolutely.
but maintain trust with
Their
team.
group? So yeah, I guess my from what I've understood from the question that was presented to me was, maybe they have to maintain a level of authenticity while saying something that they're not truly bought into.
Yeah.
Of course,
Right.
Got it.
Let's say we decide that we're giving up the whole workplace culture, leadership, training side of things. We want to become a ravioli.
Right.
Yeah,
I
like ravioli.
This is a bad example. I also love ravioli.
Okay.
We're becoming a canned fish operation, and I think it's the wrong thing to do. But I have to tell my team that this is the way we're going
and support it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So no, that's great context. And I think that happens. Someone's probably listening to this right now dealing with something like that. I think one of the things, the challenge I think leaders, particularly in the middle, face is recognizing that you're there to support your team, but you're also there to represent the organization as well. And you're kind of I like to say the crossroads, but it's actually the merge where you have your team and the organizational needs, and we need to kind of bring things together in a way that's aligned. And I think one of the things that leaders can often get, I'd say, or at least I just say from my own experience, I know something I got kind of sucked into when I'd be dealing with, maybe there's a policy change that I don't agree with. I felt that when I would talk to my team, and they were frustrated too, that commiserating about my frustration with them was actually building my team. And I was demonstrating that I was there for them, that I had their back. And so I would find myself often going to that side of the table, say, yeah, this is really, this doesn't make sense. And on the flip side, then, and I'm back on the other side of the table having this conversation. And what I learned, and I'll say specifically, I used finance, I think, as an example, because I had this situation happen. I was responsible for a group that traveled all over the world at one point. So our travel expense policy was really important to us. And we started doing a lot of government work. And then we had to shift our expense reporting, as you can imagine, because there was different government requirements. And it was really, really difficult. And we had a very lax approach before. And my team was really frustrated with this new policy. And I completely, I commiserated with them about it. And they felt I had their back. And they felt they were actually connected with me as a leader. But what I realized in hindsight, what I was doing was I was sending signals to my team that management really doesn't have their stuff together. And what would have been important for me to do is, instead of kind of commiserate and pile on, say, tell me about your frustrations. I hear you're frustrated. Can I, tell me about them? And what I'll do, I'll take this information, I'll bring that to the policymaker, right? But what and raise those. And once we have that conversation, then say, okay, given that, can we agree while we're figuring this out to follow the policy the way that's written? Because one of the things that's important for managers to know, part of your job is to, execute against the policies as they're written. And I think, so we need to be careful as leaders that we can be empathetic and understand. So we don't want to just shut people down. We don't need to even blindly say, I totally agree with this. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm struggling with this one myself a little bit. However, I'm sure there's reason for it. Let's figure that one out together.
Yeah.
It's kind of my initial thought. And I was a little bit more wordy than I needed to be. What are your thoughts, Eric?
Yeah. So when you don't agree, the person you speak to about that is not the person one level down from you. It's the person that's either at your level or the person one level up from you.
Right.
So like you said, Chris, there's nothing wrong with speaking about the new change or policy or whatever it is to your team. And when people express frustration, hearing it, saying, thank you, can I bring that back to my management team or the team above me or whatever? Like you said, Chris, I think that's great. But the other thing I think about from a workplace culture perspective is this. In a healthy organization, all organizations make mistakes, even healthy ones. I mean, they make a lot of mistakes too. But let's say a decision has been made. If you as a middle manager, if the organization is doing a good job at building trust between senior managers and middle managers, or senior leaders and middle leaders, they should be able to speak into the decision early enough that they can say, I'm not feeling comfortable with this. But also see that their job is to build workplace culture, not tear it down. And as soon as a middle leader says to somebody below them, this is stupid, but we got to do it, it tears the organization apart. Right. It decreases trust in the organization. Instead, say, you know what, I don't quite understand this myself. I'm sure the people who are making this decision have good intentions and thoughts. They're not trying to make our lives miserable. I'm certain about that. I don't quite understand it. I'm going to seek more information myself. I'll take your concerns back. Thank you. We're going to get through this together as an organization. Those sorts of things, like express confidence that people aren't idiots. They're not trying to be idiots. Maybe they made a decision that wasn't perfect, right? But yeah, kind of building on what Chris is saying there.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that, is it's important when we're dealing with where our team's frustrated to validate what they're experiencing, acknowledge that. And I think you can do that. But we want to, it's a challenge not to get consumed by that and feel that because the reality is in that moment, it might feel like we're building the team up, but the reality is we're sending strong messages that the group does. And I think you can still be authentic, but not necessarily kind of get pulled into the gossip of it, because we're often dealing with assumptions and narrative. And I think it's important for leaders to recognize, are we talking about fact here? Or are we talking about assumptions, and be able to catch those? But we don't want to shut down that dialogue, but we want to understand their concerns, validate them, and then talk to the appropriate people about that. It would be the way I would
Exactly. And most people in a decision-making context can live with a decision they don't win by, as long as they have some sense of why that decision was made, and was there a fair process, or were people consulted, or like there's a sense that it wasn't an arbitrary decision that nobody had any thought in, right?
Yeah.
So most people can do that.
And it'll be honest, as I think back on this, I know we could move to another question here, Scott, but when I think back to times when, I was asked questions about decisions that I didn't really understand, maybe didn't agree with, if I'm being really honest with myself, I was copping out a little bit by just saying, oh, I don't know, it's just kind of a ridiculous thing that compliance is asking for or finance is asking for. It's like, I didn't go have a conversation. I used my own narrative and assumptions. So part of it was what I had to learn. This was my journey, was I had to catch my own narratives and realize that I don't understand this. I'm responsible for this group. I actually need to go understand this.
Yeah, I need to go figure this out.
And I need to figure out the what and the why behind this so I can then communicate it. So I realized I took the easy way out a little bit too often than I care to admit, but that's the reality.
All right, question number 2.
Okay. Good answers.
Maybe.
We'll see.
I'll let our team know that they can listen, and then they can rate the answers.
Yeah.
I'll come back in a couple months and we'll talk about it. What is the best way for leaders and middle managers to stay approachable and encourage staff to ask questions, especially newer employees who might have some hesitation?
I think that when we are in a leadership role, it's very difficult to see clearly the impact we have on other people. It's very clear, it's very difficult, and we sometimes either we're totally unaware of the effect of power and how it amplifies our voice, or maybe we're dimly aware, we have some awareness. And I think that sometimes one of the things that I've seen other leaders do that I've really appreciated, I'm going to go back to Randy Greaser, who founded our organization. He was very clear when he made a mistake. Like he spoke about it, right? He was like, you know what, I made a mistake. I think if we set ourselves up as imperfect people, and can you let me know if you see things differently? If we set things up like with, I'm human, I make mistakes, I'm not perfect. Oh, by the way, I really value your opinion. Another thing that I saw him do one time with a new employee that I really valued was he said, you know what? I hired you because you're smart. I'd really love it if you disagreed with me, if you told me. Just tell me, because you're an intelligent person. You've got great perspective. Just setting yourself up in that relationship with some humility and some, hey, you've got your own perspective that's different than mine. I know that I have the manager role here. I know that sometimes feels a bit awkward, but you know what? My philosophy and the approach of this organization is that we all need each other and we all need each other's brains, and I'm not perfect and I'm going to make some mistakes. I'd love to know about that. Here's how I'll respond, and I'm going to share with you when I think I'm wrong or I've made a mistake, or some of those sorts of humility kind of signals that can be put out there.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think to build on that, there's a couple of things. How to actually be approachable is maybe how do you make that an actionable word? I think part of that is, and Scott, you actually said at the beginning here about, just give me a minute. If you had that luxury, just give me a minute to formulate my response. I think what's important for leaders at all levels to know is when someone comes to you, they're coming obviously for a reason. And even in that moment, you might be in the middle of something really intense. Just stop and go, okay. And shift out of what you're doing so you're present in that moment. And start with, it's good to see you. And even that alone starts to shift. What can I do for you? Or how's that helpful? So that's number one, just, to make sure that that's there. Then from there, you can gauge whether or not you answer that moment. Maybe they've got something really important to talk about and you're in the middle of something. Say, that's really important. Can we book time later to begin with? So just good to see you. What were you hoping for when you came to see me? That's a great opening question. And on the flip side, when they do come with a question or ask something, thank them for it.
Thank them. Yeah.
Right. And even if what they brought up was prickly, and just thank them for it. I will share an example of one of my first weeks here at Achieve. And Eric, this had to do with you and I. We were in a meeting as a group, and Eric said something to the team that I was uncertain about. I'm like, I think that might have sent the wrong message. But let's play this one out. I was sitting here. I was like, do I say something to the CEO? I just heard this thing. And we have a relationship that predates me starting here. So I had some confidence in Eric's approachability. But I just said, hey, can I share something with you? And he said, sure. And so we had an open conversation about it. And he thanked me in that moment. And that was one piece. As I recall, you went off and did something with that piece of information. Mm-hmm. And then I was just in the lunchroom just getting ready to leave at the end of the day. And Eric came up to me and said, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I really appreciate that. And I was like, and I think you were smiling about it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, that totally gave me permission to do that again. Right? So I think part of it is check ourselves when someone comes to see us. They're clearly here for a purpose. Mm-hmm. So thanks for good to see you. What can I do for you? That first piece. And if you really aren't in a position to do something with it, acknowledge that. But acknowledge that that's important. We'll come back to it. And then on the backside, thank them for that. Yeah. And what you're essentially doing is giving permission. And I'd say the pricklier, the better. Because if you're even prickled by it, odds are they're really nervous about it. Acknowledging that in a genuine way, though.
Yeah, right? It's a gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift that's sometimes hard to receive because as humans, sometimes it's easy to feel defensive, right, when somebody comes. But the thankfulness for it, when we see it as a gift, it helps.
And be mindful about how you even enter a space. Yeah. I think to your point, Eric, I think you even said sometimes people are dimly aware of the influence they can have. And, I'm remembering at one point I was responsible for a group of organizational development professionals and a fairly large administrative team. And I came into my office area after lunch one day, and I had my phone out, and I was looking at it. I had this really confused look on my face. It looked pretty grouchy. And I walked through the office, said nothing to anyone, went in and closed my door. Now, what I was looking at was a text from a friend of mine about the Jets game and our plans for the night. And I was confused by what he was saying. Honestly, that's what was going on. But I didn't even think. But I walked through probably 8 kind of employees. And unfortunately, one of the employees bravely opened the door and said, "Everything okay?" And it's like, "Yeah, what's going on?" And they're like, "You seemed pretty upset when you came in." I was like, whoa. And I realized that moment, I wasn't mindful how I was entering that space. So I think that's another important factor too, whether that's a meeting that is coming into an office space, is just be mindful of how you're entering the space and the kind of the vibes you might be giving off.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Going back to your question, say the question one more time.
Best way for leaders, middle managers to stay approachable and encourage staff to ask questions, especially newer employees who might hesitate.
Sure. Get to know them too. Express care for them as a person rather than as an employee. That's another very simple thing. Get to know them.
100%.
Express care for them as a person
Build their confidence.
more than an employee. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Next question.
Next question. Okay. How can middle managers balance giving employees autonomy while ensuring they follow company expectations?
Yeah.
Autonomy and expectations.
So letting somebody run with an idea, a concept, a task, but making sure that's balanced with
Guardrails,
Yeah.
expectations, what the goals are.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. And that one certainly can be a bit tricky as well. I want to acknowledge one of the things I'll highlight, and I did share this with the team yesterday, or the group I was working with yesterday. It's very easy for me to say these things. I'm not the one in the moment doing that. So I'm going to say, do what I'm sharing here to the extent possible. It's not always as easy as maybe we make it sound in these moments. But I think what's important here is one of the things, we talk about autonomy being really important, and it is for people. There's no question about it, and people feeling they have some say in the direction that they want to go. But in the same token, employees and just as individuals actually need us to hold them accountable as well. It's actually a balance of both.
It's a balance.
And that's what we're looking for. And what we find sometimes, you have leaders that are very high on kind of the care, call that continuum, and in letting people, trusting people and letting them kind of run with things. And you have some leaders that are really, think of this as that XY axis. And you've got some leaders that are really good at being clear on what they need to do and how to do it. Right? That's a strength. And I used to think, well, if you're caring first, that's really what matters. And the other stuff comes. What I've come to learn is it's actually the balance, and
it's both.
It's both. And I'll just ask you this question, Scott. If you were tasked with something and and there was a concern about the direction you were going, would you want to know?
Absolutely.
Sure. Right. I would want to know too. I'm sure you would as well, Eric. So it's important, but it's how we go about doing that to begin with. So it is giving people, enough freedom to make decisions, but balance that with clarity around what's necessary. So to your point, how do you do that? Let's be clear on what we're asking someone to do.
Right.
And like I said, those guardrails. Let's think about bowling with the rails up. How can you put those rails up so they can go through it? But there's no gutter balls there. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean failure's not allowed, but just keep them in. Let's just, let's put those rails up a little bit. Here's what I'm asking you to do. You've got complete freedom to do this, and maybe schedule some check-ins along the way. Is a good way to.
Can I jump off of that before?
Yeah, go for it.
do.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we have, I love the bowling analogy. I love analogies.
Okay.
Those points where the bowling ball hits those guardrails.
Yeah.
I think that's
Sure.
important. I think that is where a middle manager will be like, okay, well, how do I be a soft, nice, cushy bounce off of a guardrail rather than, you did that wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think there's an art form there.
Sure
that
is.
If there's any tips or tricks.
Yep.
So that's, in some ways, that's the feedback part of now you're on your journey and oops, you're heading toward a guardrail. So let's talk about building the guardrails and then let's talk about that. So Chris is talking about building the guardrails. I think about it this way. What is the thing that needs to be done? Person needs a clear goal, a clear expectation. Some organizations call them KPIs. How will you know if you've succeeded? And what level of autonomy do you have in getting there? So there's the what do you need to succeed? What level of autonomy? The how, the guardrails can be a couple of different things. You can say a guardrail is your budget. A guardrail is, okay, this is a collaborative project. And we might say the guardrails are the values we've agreed to as an organization about how we work together. So you got to get this done. This is your KPI. This is your target, your output, your expectation. How you do that? Well, work within the company's values. The company's values are these. And if we seem to be going toward one of those guardrails, like, wow, we're starting to step outside of the way we think that we should be working together, or whatever else you've set up as the guardrail, then it's a conversation about what's leading to the edge, to the guardrail, rather than you're doing it wrong.
Right.
Like, hey, we talked at the beginning, you're working on this project. We set X as a budget. We said, here are the parameters, the guardrails along the way. I've noticed that it looks like we're getting really close to this guardrail over here. Can you tell me about that? And it's a curious question.
Right.
I'd like to understand that because from my view as somebody who's not right in the middle of the project like you are, it looks like maybe we're heading toward the gutter, or maybe we're not. So that's why I want to ask you the question. This is what I see. Can you help me understand that? And then you have a dialogue. It's a question. And it's like, okay, well, we set the guardrails. Are the guardrails working for you? If they're not working for you, we need to figure that out. That's a conversation. But it's not about them being bad or even necessarily. People act in ways they think are reasonable and right. Our job as the manager is to get curious about what we see and approach it with curiosity.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think, so that's great about setting the guardrails and then even how we address it, be curious. And I think what I'm hearing in your question, Scott, is so when they do rub up against, or let's even say when they hit it so hard that they go over, they're in the next lane. Right?
Wow, that's impressive.
Things happen. And I get that kind of that's that art that you're talking a little bit about. How do you respond in those moments?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that's important here, and I think curiosity is key, that when something like that happens, we want to make sure, that's one of the things we talk about when we do culture transformation work with organization work with leaders. We talk about critical moments. And there's moments throughout the day. We're having some of them right now. There's thousands of moments that happen in a day. But there are some that are more critical than others that have a disproportionate kind of weight in shaping someone's experience. I would say when an error occurs or a potential error occurs, that's what I would call a critical moment in a leadership kind of employee exchange. So one of those things, first of all, to recognize is that is a critical moment. So as I mentioned before, mindset is really important in those moments. And we want to make sure that as a leader, it can be frustrating sometimes when we even see something. Maybe they're off budget, they're behind. We need to make sure that before we engage in that conversation, we ourselves are regulated.
Yeah.
So that the conversation we have is about them, about their growth, about their development, and not about our frustration. Our frustration's warranted, it's our own stuff, but that's not the place to work out our frustration. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And one of the exercises we do with leaders, is to get really practical here, is we do this at the beginning of most of our leadership programs, that do a leadership reflection on the leader that you want to be. And I'd like to ask, what do you want for the people that you lead? And how do you want to be experienced? Okay, so and spend time on that. Really think about those questions. I've never heard a leader say anything less than inspiring. No one has ever said, I want to screw my people up. No one has ever said, I want to make them feel insignificant. Use that. So when a critical moment like the bump up against the guardrail happens and you're going to the conversation, reconnect with, okay, what do I want? And how do I want to be experienced? That helps get you into the space to go in and have that conversation. And as Eric mentioned, if you can go in with curiosity, because guaranteed they didn't do it with intention to screw up.
No.
So let's be curious about it.
Yeah.
It starts there. Yeah.
I like it. Okay. This is great. I want to use more bowling analogies. Like,
Right,
what is
bowling's fun.
what's that polishing ball from The Big Lebowski?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Jesus.
Yeah,
He was
exactly.
polishing his bowling ball.
That's setting up people for success. Okay.
Yeah.
Why is it important for middle managers to explain the reasoning behind decisions? Now, I know you've answered this in some parts, so maybe we can do
100%.
this one a little bit quicker, but we can, if there's any other thoughts you have around this that you want to add to, and how can they handle pushback when employees question those decisions?
Can I start with this one, Eric? You're right. That does build off. Why is it important? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of the things that's really key when it comes to decision making. What we need to really inform people we're responsible for, we need to answer two questions when there's a decision that's been made, a direction that's made. What's the point, and why in this way? And the interesting thing is, if you can answer those questions, I think this even leads back to your previous question, even if someone doesn't agree with the decision, but they understand the point and why it's done this way, that's a very close second to full buy-in.
Yeah.
And if you answer those questions well, even if they don't agree, it's probably not coming up again because they get it. But oftentimes, again, if we're taking a little bit more of the easy way, it's like, I don't know, just do it. Okay, it's going to come back up again. So what's the point and why in this way is a way to really inform people about the reasoning behind the decision. And like I said, I think about our employees here, all reasonable people, that if they understand that would, okay, I don't agree, but I get it. And that's a close second. So I think that's something we need to strive for.
And then to add,
yeah.
And if you've got a significant concern, can you let me know about that?
Yeah.
And I can push that back up. For now, this is what we've decided as an organization. This is why.
Yeah.
But you know what? You've got some valid ideas too. So let's see if we can bring them back up, or here's where you can go with those. Something like that.
Yeah. And I think just to add with this, and you mentioned when there's pushback. So even if we say, what's the point and why in this way, and there's still pushback, could happen, probably has in various situations. Eric, in the last situation, talked about the importance of curiosity. That becomes really important as well.
Yeah.
So I've just explained what the point and why in this way, and there's still pushback. I'm curious. Could be even me. I didn't really explain myself very well. That could be one, right? Or there might be something else behind that. So if someone still has pushback after that, I would ask a curious question. So can you tell me more about that?
Yeah.
And in fact, as a leader, pay attention to how you're feeling about it. If you feel a bit of tension, that tension actually isn't about them, that's about us.
Yeah.
And let that actually be a sign to say, to lean in and go, can you tell me about that?
Yeah.
And then whatever they say, they might open up something that it might have nothing to do with this change.
Right.
So I just say, tell me about that. And then even if they ask for something completely outlandish, like what would you need to feel better about this change? And they say, I need Eric to do a lap on a unicycle every morning and give us the update. I'm just having fun.
That would
here.
be
It's
silly.
Like, yeah.
Yes.
Then ask, what difference would that make if every morning Eric came in on a unicycle? And just, maybe things wouldn't be so tense. Maybe a little more light. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Things are tense for you. Let's talk about that. We can, what I'm getting at? So
right.
I think
The temptation of the leader is to shut it down and say, come on, just do it.
Yeah.
But we need to fight against that tension and say, tell me more. Well, what's that about? And what's that about?
Because they might have reasonings behind that you've not considered.
That's right.
Right? And that's value.
And I would
sure.
even say they might, it's not a might, they absolutely do.
And sometimes
right.
Good point.
Sure.
they do. And sometimes actually they haven't even thought it through fully. They just know they don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And so your job in asking questions is to help them articulate what's really going on. And if you don't surface that stuff, then it's just going to bubble out in other places, snarky comments in the next team meeting, right? Or whatever that, and that just kind of festers. So our job as a middle manager is to surface it, listen to it, validate it, and help them decide what they want to do with it. So you really hate this. Okay, say more. Well, this, and this. Okay, say more. And then if they're still at a place where they're like, I hate this, I don't want to do this. And you say, well, so where does that leave you in terms of your employment here?
Yeah, what are
like,
options?
what does that mean? What are the options for you? How can you deal with that? Because so again, but if we don't surface it, it leaks out all over the place. So our job is to surface things and listen to it and help people decide what they want to do with it.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Okay.
Next question.
Next question. We got.
I wish I had a piece of paper I could just throw over my shoulder.
I
Next
know.
question.
Can't come back to
Nailed
this
it hard,
one.
just like a game show.
All right. Okay. How much does a unicycle cost? And can Eric ride one? No.
Well, I have one in my basement, but it's not mine.
serious?
It's my kids.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
This is.
I'm
Learn
somehow
something new
not
every day.
surprised that that's the case. You're a fun person.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. No, that's meant as a compliment.
How can middle managers or staff manage up when they don't have formal authority over leadership or middle managers?
Oh, yeah.
What are some ways that they can use their influence effectively?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good one. You can't manage up. It doesn't work that way, but you certainly can influence up. Yeah. So like to take the word manage out
Yeah.
and start talking about, okay, there's simple answers that are very hard to do in real life. So the simple answer is this: understand clearly what your interests are. Okay, so something's frustrating you, or you disagree about something, you think something's going off the rails, you really want your next level up or 2 levels up to do things differently, act differently, whatever. Okay, great. But why? What's really important about that? What are the things that are in your values, in your beliefs, in your motivations that are being frustrated? Understand that, and then start to think about what the company values in terms of its values, its beliefs, and start to think about that person in terms of the good person that they actually are in their heart and their good intentions. So once you've done that work, which is hard and often requires you to sit down with somebody else and talk it through, then you can say, that person, a level up or 2 levels up, they really care about X. Let's say they care about reputation, or they care about, I don't know, team success. They care about whatever. And if you think of what the behavior is or the decision is, or is getting in the way of them or the team or the company being able to complete its mission, and you feel like you have some trust with that person, then you approach them and you say, can I have a conversation? This conversation's hard. And I want to bring it to you because I think you would care about this. And I bring it to you with the greatest level of respect because I think that you would want to know what some of my thoughts are. Here's what I think you care about as a leader or as a, whatever. Here's what I think is happening. And here's my question, because I see a disconnect between this and this. Mm-hmm. So that's, maybe that doesn't sound simple. In theory, the theory of it, though, is it's hard to do because we feel nervous and because that person has power over us, right? Chris managed up, or when he came to me with that example a little while ago, and he said, Eric, you said that thing. I wonder how it landed. He did that, but he had a level of trust, but he also spoke to what I care about. I don't want to say something that's going to put people in a wrong position. I don't want to create tension. And so he approached me about that. You said this thing. I was curious what you said about that. I'm worried it might have landed in a way you didn't want, right? Oh, right. So I experience care in the way he approaches me. That's one answer. I know, Chris, you have some strong feelings about this one too.
I do, but I think the way you lined that up, Eric, is great. And I think it's actually something we can flip that around even when providing feedback. Mm-hmm. If you're the leader too, maybe you're in a position of power. Either way, think that through. That's how you provide meaningful feedback, actually, I think. Yeah. And I think sometimes leaders lean on the fact that they're not intentionally, that they are in that position. I could just be real direct. No, you want to frame it up that way so that feedback is received. So I think your steps are great. And you know what, maybe what we'll do is we can itemize that, and I can share that at the end, because I think that's a real actionable piece. But one of the things you said in there is really important. I love that we can't manage up, we can't influence up.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the importance of trust, because this was something I feel really strongly and have for years about just management accountability. Because we see too often people in leadership roles not really holding themselves accountable. And one of the things I feel passionate about is if you see something going off the rails, you have a responsibility to say something, right? You can't just sit idly by and go, well, I knew that was going to happen, and watch that train wreck happen. And I used to encourage people, if you see, you have to go talk to that director. You need to do this. That was advice I would give. And I still stand by that, but I add something to that before I do. What's your level of trust with that leader? Because if it isn't high, then it's still the steps Eric said are important, but you want to go cautiously with it. Because the reason I bring that up is in that leader-employee relationship, there is a power differential at play.
Yes.
And if trust is low, that's actually on the leader to start that. So I just put that out there as a word of caution. I will tell you, I remember, I'll just share the story of someone I had worked with, came into my office one Friday afternoon, and same middle, like a manager, and said, I'm really concerned with this decision, the direction our department's taking. And I was like, "Whoa, have you talked to your executive director about this?" And he's like, "I don't think I can." I'm like, "What are you paid for? You're a manager. You know better. You need to let them know." Okay, that was great. He was inspired. I got to do my job. He went and did. Didn't really think much about it. About 6 months later, he's left the organization. And a few months after that, we connect just offline. I say, "Let's get together for lunch." And we get together for lunch. I said, "Hey, tell me tell me about your journey." He goes, "Well, it honestly kind of started with a conversation with you." And I said, "Oh,
You got me fired."
No, he didn't lay any blame. He said that day that you spoke, he goes, "I remember how excited I was when I left." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I had that conversation and it did not go well." And that was kind of the start from there.
Yeah.
Now, he wasn't laying blame. In fact, it led to for him a better outcome. But the point I wasn't being mindful of was he said something important. I don't know if I can. I should have actually sought that out and said, "Okay, if you're not really in a trusting position with that individual, I think you still have an obligation to share what you know, but you want to do that in a perhaps in a different way."
Right. Like,
So
Chris, that story is one of, I wasn't there, and there's lots of ways to pick it apart, but did he know how to approach it? Did he,
yeah.
I think now you would probably say, can we role play that once
That's
together?
right.
So it's not a lot of trust there. So
Right.
imagine I'm that executive director and I'm going to be that person. And why don't you try it with me first? Because it's possible he didn't approach that with a lot of art.
Yep.
Right? He might have just said, "I think this is not a great decision." And
Right.
then when the other person maybe reacted a bit defensively, there was more of an argument than a healthy conversation that happened. Right? So on the other hand, maybe he realized that the executive director, that one doesn't listen well and he doesn't want to work for them anyway. So now I'm off. So I don't know what really happened there, but I think that the middle manager who wants to influence up, if they have a strong relationship of trust, approach that person with your interests, with their interests in mind, ask them if they're open to a conversation, approach it with some curiosity, and you're going to be okay. If you're worried about trust, you're worried about your ability to say things in a good way, maybe you're feeling really intense about it, get some coaching.
Yep.
With a coworker on your level, maybe a different manager, maybe you have an HR department, maybe you have internal coaches in your organization, maybe you don't, but a trusted friend, role play it, think it through.
That's it.
Yeah. You do have an obligation not to let your organization fail.
You got it. Yep.
Right. And if you think this is going to create failure, you need to speak about that, but you also need to speak about that with some degree of humility and curiosity as you seek to influence that.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's exactly what it was. In that situation, I could have taken, I still stand by the advice. There was just more support that was necessary in that moment that I just was, I was making it a one size fits all. In a really, this is why I asked about trust. If the trust level, this is what I like to do with folks I coach, where is it on a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah.
If it's an 8 or above, just go have the conversation because it's probably a pretty strong, strong connection. You can. Eric and I have a trusting relationship. I could probably even stumble through it and still ultimately go well. If it's lower than that, then you still need to have the conversation, but you just want to practice and role play a little bit, then go in a little bit more prepared. Those are those moments, Scott, like you said before, I'm going to take a few minutes and think about this one before I go and have it. But you're absolutely right. You do have an obligation to say something. Yeah.
We have one. If you think there's a question that might have a short answer, we have time for one more.
I was going to
Otherwise, we're
actually
jump into
say
rants
to
and
be
raves.
mindful of time. I think that the other two questions relate pretty much to what we've been talking about. So
Perfect.
in the summary of the episode, we probably could lay out some points there that would answer these questions really well. So yeah, I think this is great.
Cool.
I'll gather more for a future episode.
All right, so here we are. We're at the point of our show where we do some rants and raves. And actually, Scott, we're going to turn it over to you for a bit of a rant.
All right.
So this is great. First-time guest on the show, long-time listener and contributor behind the scenes. But
Sure.
let's hear a rant from Scott.
Welcome to the usual lunchtime at Achieve. Rant from Scott.
Scott's just ranting away.
Yeah.
This is, no.
I'm not gonna believe what happened. Okay, so my rant today has to do with basically approaches to how you can coach performance that's maybe not in line with what you would like to see.
All right.
Okay, so I may zoom out a little bit here. I have a colleague of mine who stepped into a leadership role at a new company. It's a big organization, multiple departments. and one of her team is sales-based. They were struggling to hit their numbers when she got in. So she brainstormed with the team, approaches with customers, listened to their concerns, helped the sales team rethink their approaches, and progress was happening, which was awesome. But then higher ups came to visit, right? And this is an opportunity for things to potentially have there might be an incongruency there. I'll use a Chris word. They had a very different style. Their approach was pressure, apply pressure, threats. If they're not hitting metrics, put them on a performance improvement plan, get them. We don't want dead weight affecting the numbers. The team totally shut down. Their morale tanked. People started job hunting, rightfully so. And it was no longer a place anyone wanted to put in. And surprise, surprise, picking up that stick didn't really magically fix the numbers. So a couple weeks had gone by, my colleague was dealing with this, trying to continue to support the team and work on things using her methods. And within that, a new person got brought onto the team, not related to, people exiting, but just the team was expanding a bit. And this person did not have any idea about anything that was going on, any of the previous drama or any of the tension or fear-based pressure. Same location, same customers, same clientele, the same tactics, same approaches. They crushed it, right? Sure. They blew past their goals. They hadn't been dragged through that. And I feel that it's one thing that I keep in my mind where it's like, if your team is in their heads worrying about, is the thing I'm going to do get me fired? Sure. Or if I don't do this, right? That's what your head's at. Your head's not in the game. Of course. Right? And so that was just like a little snapshot of how I could see it. Like the wrong approach to handling that. It's like you almost want to light the fire within someone, not under.
I love that. That's a great analogy. Light the fire within, not under.
Yeah, I like that, Scott. It's unfortunate to hear that, and I think sadly that happens too often out there. And I think the point becomes when pressure isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's how that pressure is applied becomes really important. And I think what that individual did is they compromised people's sense of security and safety.
Yeah.
Right, which is a fundamental human need. So, of course, they were incredibly motivated, but their motivation was to keep themselves safe. So all of their priorities no longer were this. It was protection.
Safety.
So what you had were highly motivated individuals just motivated in the wrong direction. So your point about light the fire within, not underneath. That's exactly it. Because underneath, I'm burning. Within, it's like, ooh, there's something inside. I got to get this out, and that's a good thing. So I really like that analogy. Yeah.
I want to give props to my colleague because there's a perspective shift where and this is not going for all higher ups or any, just some people, their perspectives might say the problem is them.
Right.
Not let's work with them to see what the problem
to
is.
solve the problem.
To
together.
solve the problem. It's us versus the problem, not us versus them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so easy to put the blame on people rather than to work with people to understand what's happening.
Yeah.
And when we apply pressure, like do it or else you're going to be fired, or you got to get this up, that pressure, no dead weight around here, it creates the wrong motivation.
Yeah. I think going back to what you said before, though, Eric, if you can apply pressure that's aligned with what's important to us as an organization, what we're trying to accomplish, what your goals are, that's the good pressure. That's the within stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I love it. I feel like in my role as a CEO, one of my jobs is to try to figure out ways to ignite the fire within, which is passion, which is motivation, which is I want to do this. I want to succeed. Yeah. It's light the fire within people. Yeah. Right. And which is like connecting with what they value. Yeah. That's going to be our episode title, Light the Fire Within, Middle Management. Yeah. That's great. Thank you, Scott. Quick rant and / rave for me here. We're in the middle of all this global tariff escalation, de-escalation, tariff wars, etc. And my rant is that I think when governments play fast and loose with fiscal policy, it makes it very difficult for organizational leaders to keep their organizations whole and well and functioning and focused. Because real people are facing real economic uncertainty and sometimes catastrophe. As anxiety and hardship People are worried about that. And even if most people in a population aren't going to face that, some people do. Because of the way global news works, we hear the stories of the people that do, and we think, oh, I could be like them, and we empathize with them, and we feel that as well. My rave is this. I have talked with a number of leaders of organizations in our city here in Winnipeg over the last couple of weeks. And where I've been very impressed is the leader who says, you know what? There's a lot of stuff out there I can't control, but I really care about the work that we are doing as an organization. I trust my team to get through this. We're going to stay focused on what we can control. And I think there's going to be opportunity for us no matter what the big governments are doing. And that's what we're going to focus on. And so I want to give props to all those leaders out there right now who, in the face of sort of global economic uncertainty, are staying focused on their missions and on their visions and on their people and what they do have control over, and trying to create a sense of stability when people come to work. I think that's the right thing for leaders to be doing at this time.
I love that. Yep. So important.
All right. So we're at the time now where we're going to conclude the show. We're going to turn it over to Chris to give us some action items to take away for our listeners.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Scott, for joining us. I really enjoyed this format of asking those questions. And Eric, thank you for your insights. We had a bit of a debrief afterwards, and takeaways for us was there were some real underlying themes around all of the answers, and I think that's really important for us to reflect on. It's no matter how we approach these challenges as leaders, we want to balance both clarity and care. So we want to make sure we are demonstrating our care for the individuals, but providing the clarity that they need so they can be successful. Whether that's in feedback, whether we're providing direction, it's the balance between the two. And one of the superpowers to really ensuring we do that in the best way is approaching these things with curiosity. And starting from the point that our employees are here to do good work. And when we run into some challenges, we're just missing something. So if we approach it with care and curiosity, we can get clear on what's needed. So that's that first piece. One of the things that I really liked as well in the cast is when Eric was asked the question about how do you manage up? And Eric highlighted the fact that we can't manage up, but we can influence up. And he laid out kind of a 4-step process to how to provide feedback to your leader that, when we debrief this, really, this is how you should apply feedback anyway, but I'll walk you through this. When you have feedback you want to provide your leader or somebody in a position of power, first, understand what are your interests here? What's important to you? What are your values? So what are your interests? That's one. Two, what are the organizational interests? How do your interests align with the organizational interests or the values or the direction the organization is going? And then the third is, what do you believe the leader's interest is here? What do they value? What's important to them? So when you approach them to have the conversation, you frame it up in reverse. You talk about their interests, how that links to the organizational interests, and then why you're bringing this forward. And if you approach it that way, likely there will be an openness to receiving it. And of course, one of the things we talked about is the importance of trust in that relationship. And if trust is high, go have that conversation. Do the 1, 2, 3 as you think about it, and then 3, 2, 1 when you share that back. Now, if the trust is low, maybe pull a resource in to help you practice so you approach it in the best possible way. And the third piece, and this was our takeaway of the day, was what Scott shared, was it's really important that if we really want to motivate people towards better results, whatever those might be, is we want to light the fire within, not the fire under them. Because when we light the fire under them, that's when they can get scared. They can get their security is compromised. Then their motivation goes to that. What we want to do is light the fire inside, and that motivation is coming from within, and that's our best way to achieve results. So, and one of the things that as mentioned, we had a debrief afterwards, and Sky, who's our videographer today, who's been with the organization only for about 3 months, was sharing their insights that I thought was something that was really insightful. she was just listening to us have this conversation, and just through understanding that, yeah, the leaders within the organization are starting from a place of care and are trying to provide clarity, and also recognizing that we aren't always getting it right, gives them comfort in providing feedback. So one of the things we think is important is take time to talk with your teams about what you want for each other and how you want to approach it. Because when people understand that you're coming from a place of care, even if you stumble over it, it'll make that a little bit easier. But if they don't really know what your motivators are, it makes it really challenging. So Sky, thank you for sharing that with us. Very insightful as I'm coming to learn about you with all of our conversations. Listen, folks, if what we talked about resonated with you, want to look for some more resources, go to the achievecenter.com, our website. There is a whole bunch of resources. We have some free resources there. We have a lot of programs as well that talk about how to provide feedback, how to lead with intention, whether it's a half-day program, full day, or even so we have some 8-week certification programs as well. So check that out. Also, make sure to hit us up on LinkedIn. Hit Eric, myself, or Wendy, and now Scott as well on LinkedIn. And let's stay connected, folks. I had a good opportunity just the other day. One of our longtime listeners shared some feedback on our podcast. I can't thank them enough. So let's keep that coming. We like to make this content relevant and something you're interested in hearing. Most of all, though, thanks for taking time to listen, and we'll talk to you next month.
Looking for free resources, training, and consulting in the areas of leadership and workplace culture? Be sure to check out achievecenter.com. That's achieve, CENTRE.com.